Hello and welcome to Spread Book Joy. I've got some half-term reading recommendations for you. Some new, some newish, some quite old, but all of them excellent books. October's a wonderful month for themes. We've got autumn, so I've got an autumnal read for you, and we've got lots of obviously Halloween, so some spooky reads for you. They're old ones, but great ones, and something very new. October was also Black History Month, and I read one of the best books on Black British history for children I've read ever, actually. And I think there's also a real lack of history books focusing on Black British history during Black History Month. You get a lot focus on civil rights movement in America and American Black historical figures in America, but this one is an excellent book, so I'm going to kick off with that. Black and British, A Short Essential History by Professor David Olusoga. So he did a book on Black British history for grown-ups, a proper historical book for grown-ups, and he was requested to do one for younger readers, and this is it. It's for readers of 8 to 12. I read it in one sitting. It's fascinating. It talks about Black British history going all the way back to the Romans. So you can see here we start with the Romans, and it's done in chronological order. It's a nice simple read, it's accessible, and it's got lots of pictures, maps, and lots of really fantastic information and a little bit of facts on each page. Gives you a bit of a summing up of some of the information on the page. Really interesting as well. He talks about how our modern day ideas of race and being black or being white and being defined by your skin colour was something that slave owners introduced so that they could obviously, you know, make it seem that there's a difference, that some people are more superior to others, and to justify their trade. He talks about the abolition movement here in the UK, and then he talks about the regiments in the First World War and the Second World War. There were African regiments that fought for the British, but they weren't allowed to fight in Europe. It's interesting, it's really fascinating actually. So I'd highly recommend this book. I think if you're a teacher, you need it in your classroom. Schools should have this as a standard book in British school classrooms, so it's fantastic. Please get it, really important and really eye-opening. This next book, Pax, is a few years old now. I think it was 2018 that I bought this. It's all about a boy called Peter, and Peter had found a fox, and his father let him keep the fox, and the fox has been raised with him. Kind of reminds me of like the Fox and the Hound a little bit, but they're seemingly inseparable, and then they have to leave because there's a war and the country's been invaded, and his dad makes him give up Pax and leave him in a forest, but Peter can't forget him, so he goes looking for him across a war-torn country, or a country that's under threat of invasion, and Peter sets out to find him. It's beautifully written, it's a lovely book, it's really heart-wrenching, beautiful bond that Peter and Pax have, and you sort of see what's going on with Pax and what's going on with Peter at different points in the story, but it's beautifully written, lovely story, kind of heart-wrenching but heartwarming at the same time, and a fantastic, I think of it as an autumnal read because of the cover, but that's not necessarily the theme of it, but it's a wonderful book. This next book, A Pinch of Magic by Michelle Harrison, is actually a book I've got a really good video on. If you want to know more about it, I've got a really in-depth review, which I'll just put on the screen for you here, and you can click, of A Pinch of Magic, which I just added up this week. It's fantastic. It's the first book in a series. They're called the Widdershins. It's the Widdershins Sisters series, or the Widdershins series, and it's all about 3 sisters and a family curse. And this is the first book. The second book is out now, A Sprinkle of Sorcery, which I also have. I haven't read yet, but I also have. And the third book is due out in February, and it's a planned trilogy. So also just how beautiful is this cover. 3 sisters trapped by an ancient curse, 3 magical objects with the power to change their fate. Will they be enough to break the curse, or will they lead the sisters into even deeper danger? So it starts off, it's about 3 sisters, Betty and Fliss and Charlie, and they live on the island of Crowstone with their grandmother. And the island of Crowstone's brilliantly atmospheric. The story starts on Halloween, so it's kind of a little bit, that's why I've thrown it in here and why I've done a video on it this week, because it starts on Halloween. The book's really atmospheric. The island of Crowstone seems really gloomy, and there are 3 other islands nearby called the Sorrow Isles. So here's the map, and that's the island of Crowstone, and there are 3 islands nearby called the Sorrow Isles. I think the whole thing made up is called the Sorrow Isles. So there's an island called Repent, which is where the Crowstone Tower is, and that's a prison. There's a prison and a tower. And there's an island called Lament, and I think Lament is where the graveyard is, and that's where they bury people, and an island called Torment, and that's where they banish people. So there's these islands nearby. So it's a really kind of gloomy place. It's marshy, and they live at the Poacher's Pocket Inn with their grandmother, who's a formidable woman. Betty is desperate to leave Crowstone. They've never left Crowstone, and she's desperate to get off the island and see a bit of the world, and she takes Charlie on an adventure on Halloween night to try and leave the island, and her grandmother comes to take them back and lets them into the family secrets, which include a curse and some magical objects, and yeah, then their adventure starts from there. Really loved this book. It's an excellent premise, it's got strong female characters, it's really well written, it's wonderful. This next book continues that theme of magic and mystery, and you can tell from the amazing cover. All these books have just beautiful covers. So The Dreamsnatcher is by Abi Elphinstone. The Dreamsnatcher is the first book of hers that I ever read, and it's a first book of a trilogy about Mole Pecksniff and her cat Griff. So the book starts with her going to hunt down her horse that's gone missing, and she's going to find it, and she comes across something terrible happening in the woods, and her adventure starts from there. So it's a fantastic book. It's the start of a trilogy, and the follow-up's called The Shadow Keeper and The Night Spinner. Also another female strong character and a boy character, and it's actually, I've read this with boys and girls and they all love it. It's full of action, full of adventure, and wonderful book. Next up, an oldie but a goodie, The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This book always hooks children in when I read it with them, and I've read it with lots and lots of different children over the years. The premise is it's Neil Gaiman's tribute to the Jungle Book, which he loved as a child. He decided, instead of a boy raised by wolves in the jungle, we've got a boy raised by ghosts in a graveyard, and he intended it to be sort of a collection of stories with a loose thread running through, much like the Jungle Book. So sometimes it can seem a little bit disjointed, but it's really well written. The opening is one of the best openings to a book that I've ever read with children. It always gets them really well. So, and this edition here is illustrated by the absolutely fantastic Chris Riddell, who I adore. We've got a boy called Bod, which is short for Nobody Owens, and he lives in a graveyard. And how he came to be in the graveyard is the first chapter of the book. It's dark, a little bit disturbing at times, but it's children love a scare, and it is Halloween, so I thought I'd recommend it. Really well written, and yeah, fantastic book, perfect for Halloween. Also, there is an illustrated edition which I have. It's quite expensive. You can get it in 2 parts, so illustration, the part 1 and part 2, but this is the full volume, and it's just spooky and wonderful and perfect for this time of year. So just have a quick flick through so you can see, and just brings it all to life really. But his writing is fantastic anyway. Last but not least, I'm going to recommend the Goosebumps series. Gets forgotten about quite a lot. It was a series that came out in the mid-90s, and it's famous. There are feels like there are hundreds of these books, but they're in all the libraries, and children absolutely love them, primary age children. And the reason I'm recommending them is because they're books that I like to keep in the classroom, and they're books that I like to recommend for readers who are a bit older, who are struggling with reading. Now, some people call them reluctant readers, children who can sort of functionally read but choose not to, and they're not getting any better because they're not reading enough. I don't think I've ever failed to recommend these to a child who is a struggling older reader who hasn't enjoyed them. What's really good about them, and I've got a blog post on recommendations for struggling readers, I might do a quick video on it. What's excellent about these, I've learned a bit about R.L.Stine, and because they're quite commercial, because they're quite trashy, I suppose, parents maybe don't want to necessarily want things like this recommended for their children, but one, Book snobbery is the worst possible thing you can do to put children off reading, because if they want to read the same thing, if they want to read things that are trite and formulaic and things that we think aren't necessarily good books, that's nonsense. Children should be allowed to read whatever it is they're interested in reading, because they should just be reading. First off, these books are, I suppose, trite and could be seen as formulaic, but that's no bad thing. They are learning about narrative structure. These things are surprises to them. They may not be to us, but they're surprises to them. Having that same structure imposed again and again, it's satisfying and it's comforting. So children enjoy reading books that are like that. Secondly, if they enjoy a text like this, if they get into this age where if they get hooked on a series or an author, and there are lots of them, brilliant. You've got tons of Goosebumps books, and there are lots out there. R.L.Stine wrote them to hook children into reading, and he's based this entire series on his 1950s childhood where there were B-movies. So you've got all these amazing B-movie titles. The language in these books is aimed at 5th grade readers, so 5th grade in America, which is about year 6 over here, so children who are 10 and 11, so the vocabulary is no harder than that. And I would say, given the vocabulary levels in the UK now and what's expected of them at year 5 and 6, it's even lower. So the books are not going to be hard to read. They're designed so that children can read them rapidly and quickly, and the chapters are short, and each chapter has a cliffhanger ending deliberately so that children will be like, one more chapter. And yeah, I can't fault them. I'm always recommending them for any children who I think struggle with reading, and they're in every library, and that's why I'm recommending them for Halloween. They're in every library. There are titles galore, and they always have a happy ending and no one ever dies. So if you've ever looked at them and thought that might be too much, they are scary, but children do like a scare. Some children might find them too scary, but they're not designed to have anything bad happen to the main characters. I think R.L.Stine talks about the fact that he wrote one story where the child it didn't die, but they didn't actually end up a happy ending, and he got complaints about it. He had to write a follow-up book where everything turned out all right in the end. But yeah, I love them. And also check out this selection that I got, because I bought a pack of 10 Goosebumps books, and I got it for something like probably about £15, and I got all these books, and yeah, that's a real bargain as far as I'm concerned, and definitely ones that have to have in schools, have in the classroom, and you can find them all in the library. So treat a child to a scare this Halloween and give them some Goosebumps books if they've never heard of them, and then they'll be flying away with this series. Those are my half-term recommended reads for October. Some spooky, some autumnal, a lot of adventure, and some fantastic history. I'm going to put up some suggestions for videos at the end. I've got a fantastic in-depth review of A Pinch of Magic for anyone who's interested in using it for school or teaching or homeschooling, and I've also got a TBR video, my to be read list for half term of new books that I'm excited to read over this half term. Look forward to seeing you again on Spread Book Joy. Bye.